It was a rainy night, and the sound of the raindrops hitting the windows was strangely calming. I was on a business trip to a different city and was supposed to stay the night in a hotel. When I arrived, I wasn't too happy about stepping out of the car because of the heavy rain. I walked into the lobby, and the receptionist handed me the key to room 321. My room was on the 3rd floor. When I entered, the door and windows were shut tight, but I had a strange feeling that the room wasn't quite prepared. Maybe it was just because the hotel was old. There was nothing in the room except for a bed and a wooden table. I lay down on the bed and started to watch the rain pouring outside the window. The only sound was the rain and the occasional thunder. A few hours later, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a faint sound outside the room. At first, I thought it might be the wind or just the rain, but then the noise got clearer. It sounded like someone was knocking at the door. I stood up, confused, and walked toward the door. When I looked through the peephole, I saw no one. I paused, unsure of what to do. Then, the knocking came again, louder this time. I froze for a moment and looked at the clock. It was past midnight. Nobody should be out there at this hour. I checked again through the peephole and saw a man standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain, wearing a raincoat. I opened the door a little and asked, "Can I help you?" He looked at me and said, "Sorry, I got lost. I'm looking for room 321. For a moment, I thought he was one of the hotel staff, but when he tried to step inside, I felt uneasy. I stepped back, saying, "This is room 321. Maybe you're looking for someone else?" Without saying another word, the man smiled awkwardly, turned around, and walked away. I closed the door, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of footsteps coming closer, followed by another knock on the door. I stood still, staring at the door, but no one was there when I looked through the peephole. Feeling uneasy, I decided to go down to the lobby. When I got to the reception desk, I asked the receptionist if anyone had gone to my room. She looked at me, puzzled, and said, "No one has entered your room tonight. You're the only one on the 3rd floor." I went back to my room, still feeling off. When I opened the door, everything looked the same. Nothing had been touched, except for a small puddle of water on the floor. It wasn't there before, and I still have no idea how it got there. It was pouring rain, and I barely managed to get under the small awning in front of an abandoned store on my way home. I still had a few kilometers to go, and I didn't have an umbrella. The clock showed it was close to 11 p.m., and the street was completely deserted. The rain was so heavy that I couldn't even hear my own footsteps. I was scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself, when I suddenly noticed someone else standing under the awning with me. A tall man in all black clothing, his face hidden by the shadows of his hood. I had no idea when he got there. There was no one just a second ago. I told myself he probably just walked up quietly, like me, trying to escape the rain. Still, the fact that I hadn't noticed him earlier made me nervous. He was fumbling with something in his pocket, and I tried to act like I didn't care, but I could feel his presence. I shifted slightly to create some space between us, but the awning wasn't very big. Suddenly, he lifted his head and looked straight at me. Even though it was dark, I could tell his gaze was intense. "Strange rain, isn't it?" he said in a quiet voice. I just nodded, not wanting to talk. He asked again, "Are you waiting for someone?" His tone wasn't threatening, but it felt wrong. I forced a casual reply, "No, I'm just waiting for it to calm down." He stared at me for what felt like too long, then said, "You can wait. But maybe the rain will stay like this." I didn't know how to respond. His words seemed ordinary, but the way he said them was unsettling. The rain finally began to ease, and I took the chance to leave. As I stepped away from the awning, I glanced back. He was gone. The street was empty. No footsteps, no sign of him. It didn't make sense. When I finally got home, I locked the door behind me and exhaled, relieved to be inside. But as I glanced toward the window, I froze. 2 wet footprints were on the ground outside my door, as if someone had just been standing there. That night, it was raining heavily, the kind of rain that makes the idea of stepping outside terrifying. I was home alone, watching a movie, trying to relax after a long day. The sound of rain hitting the windows was oddly comforting, but then, out of nowhere, the doorbell rang. At first, I thought I imagined it. Who would be outside in such horrible weather? But when the bell rang again, I knew someone was really there. I got up, feeling uneasy, and slowly walked to the door. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a man standing in the rain. Something about the way he stood there, motionless, gave me a weird feeling. I cracked the door open just a bit and asked, "Yes? Can I help you?" He looked up at me and said, in the calmest voice, "Sorry to bother you. My car broke down a little ways back. Could I use your phone to call for help?" It sounded reasonable, but something about his voice made me hesitate. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Too calm, too collected. I forced a polite smile and said, "I'm sorry, my phone isn't working. Maybe you could try one of the other houses down the road." For a moment, he just stood there. Then he smiled, a strange, crooked smile that sent a chill down my spine. "All right," he said, "no problem. Have a good night." I closed the door and locked it, but something told me to check the peephole again. He hadn't moved. He was still standing there, staring at the door, or maybe at the peephole itself. My heart started racing. I turned off the lights, hoping he'd think I'd gone to bed, and went to the back room where I could look out at the yard. When I peeked through the curtain, I didn't see him anywhere. Relieved, I started to convince myself he'd left. A few minutes later, I heard a strange rustling noise from the back of the house. My stomach dropped. I tiptoed to the kitchen and looked out the window. He was there, in the backyard, standing completely still, staring at the house through the rain. At that moment, my phone rang. I nearly screamed but managed to answer it, my hands shaking. A quiet voice on the other end whispered, "Open the door." The rain seemed to pound harder against the windows, and then the backyard light went out. I still don't know how that night ended, or how I made it through. But since then, I've never stayed home alone on a rainy night